Hey Nathan, it's good to see you putting up videos again. This is a response to your videos Scantily-Clad Sexism and Role-Playing Games. And I want to first point out that it is very good of you to put your morals ahead of your business decisions here. It's not an easy decision to make, but I believe it's the right one. Now, one of your first points about how we present this hobby to somebody else is probably the most important one. After all, whether this hobby is dying or not, it will die if you don't bring new people into it, simply because of attrition, if nothing else. Now, how you present a book to somebody, it being very sexist, and also I believe the size of the book can make a big difference too. So let's use one of your examples, Pathfinder, which clocking in at 275 pages and having a rather sexist image right on the cover. You can make an argument on this one, but she is in a pose not to be fighting, but to be showing off her body in a specific way. And that is where the difference lies, really. So yes, this is the biggest one out there right now, and it is not really doing us justice the way it ought to be. One of the things that came to mind whenever I was listening to you was how you talked about this being a fantasy game and how this kind of lets people play out their fantasies. And what does it say about us if we are playing out a very sexist fantasy or a one that is very much empowering of ourselves? And even more so if we're being sold the sexist aspect of things, if putting this type of imagery on the cover of books or within books in order to sell us those books, what does that tell you that the developers think about us as the readers? Now, the challenge to come up with a role-playing game book that contains a fair bit of imagery but does not contain any sexist imagery or any in the first 50 pages, that's an excellent idea, and it kind of reminds me of the Bechdel test. So, without further ado, let's give it a try, and I have a few games that do pass. The first book is kind of a cheat, Monsters and Other Childish Things. You play kids. Obviously, people aren't going to be dumb enough to sexualize children in this way. The only image that comes close to causing a problem is this image of a creature called an excruciator, which is actually a monster posing as a human. And yes, you can clearly see that it has breasts. It's not a particularly sexualized image in my case, and of course the head is all tentacles and eyes. So, a bit of a cheap shot, but that's my first one. Next we have Durance. Now, Durance has quite a bit of art in the book, however, it's presented as if it was somebody's drawings, and it's actually a character from a fictional story that would have been created with this system, and that character is female, and she just kind of draws and makes comments, and to me, it's a great way to introduce art in that book, and none of it even comes close to being sexual, at least as far as I've seen. We also have Siren. Now, Siren is again a little bit of a cheat. The person who has put out this book recently is McGay Baker. Being a woman, I don't imagine she wants to put a lot of sexual imagery in there, and she is a sex educator herself, so she probably also doesn't want to put it in for that reason. I don't think the art for it is very good, but it's not exploitive in any way. We also have My Life with Master. It's a little light on art. I'd say maybe one every 5 pages. I'm just guessing by flipping through. But the art is decidedly non-sexual. It's, again, black and white, but it's not exploitive in any way. It kind of presents its mood and setting a little bit more than trying to sell you on cleavage or anything like that. Next we have 2 maybe passes, and I'll get into this in a little bit. First, Misspent Youth. Misspent Youth is full of art. I don't know how well you'll be able to pick it up on camera, but, well, the art is actually mostly pictures that have been put into it to represent the youth that would be a part of it. And considering that we're dealing with teenagers, they're often a group which are sexualized way more than perhaps we ought to. There's one image close to the book, page 74, so it's well past the 50 point, that does have a woman in a bikini top. She's having her head shaved by somebody who looks, the way that they're dealing with each other and the way that they're not in a barber shop or anything like that, indicates that this is probably her friend or her boyfriend. The image to me portrays more of a relationship between the two, whatever that may be, and that they are a part of the same counterculture, which is indicative of the storyline of this book anyway. So to me, that's not a sexual image, even though it has a woman wearing relatively little clothing. And the next example has one woman portrayed in an even more potentially sexual manner, which I don't think counts, but I'll let you decide. It was a mutual decision. A game about a couple, a breakup, and were-rats. It's a little bit funny that way. Now, it does have a fair bit of art, kind of skipping through it, but there's one image that I'd say, it's also past the 50 point, that may be potentially a problem. It either, depending upon how you view it, because it's a black and white, not highly detailed picture, it may be a woman who is topless or simply wearing a very transparent t-shirt. But this image right here, again, that does not make me think it's sexual. That is portraying her more as a victim than a sex object. And some people have problems with it that way, but considering that the material of the book has some element of murder to it and were-rats and relationships, it's a funny little game. But it is not a disempowering one, and it is one where people have to play cross-gender. The men play women and the women play men. So one would assume that if that was a player character in the game, there'd be a male player behind them. So there's at least that excuse. I would also believe that Kagematsu, while I don't have the book handy, is probably pretty safe for its art, and it's often one that I suggest as one to bring women into the hobby, partly because I've never known a woman not to really be interested in that, although I'm sure they're out there, and also because it's a very simple game that is heavily about the social aspect of things. It's not a combat game in any way, shape, or form. And there's a certain level of empowerment to the female players. It's a part of the design of the game and the fiction of the material itself. It is worth mentioning as well, these games are reaching a smaller audience. Now, that may mean a few things. It may mean first that the designer knows that they're not really going to turn a reasonable profit off of this game, and therefore can stick to their guns a little bit more because they know they're going to be paying for most of it anyway. It could also say that they have decided not to pander, even though they really need the extra sales if they are trying to break even. Or it could simply be that they know that their target audience is different. Now, I don't have any statistics to back this up, but my personal experience with people who are playing more of the independent side of publishing, it is a different demographic, in my experience, than the people who are playing the newer games that are coming out, like your Pathfinder or your whatever D&D version is newest, versus the people that are in other demographics as well, like the vampire players or the OSR players, whatever the case might be. Now, there are those out there who will probably make the argument that this is a trope of the genre, that the bikini babe has been on the cover of books since the first Dungeons & Dragons, and it's just a part of that experience. And I personally don't take that as an excuse any more than I would take any other tradition as an excuse to do something that is wrong. There is one excuse that I would allow, and that is one of context. And the example I'm going to give for this is Apocalypse World. Now, Apocalypse World has a lot of fairly sexual material in it. For example, part of the system is that you can print off those little brochures that are quick access to the moves. And here's one of them. And it is a very sexual image. However, the game involves sex. A lot of the images are those of people being violent or people involved in sex, because that's a part of the game. And I believe what Vincent Baker was trying to do here was create the atmosphere as you read the book, because the book is full of vulgarity and it kind of yells at you whenever you're reading it. But he's trying to make you feel a part of that setting and a part of the feel of that game. And the imagery, I believe, is a part of that. Would somebody use this as material for masturbation? Probably not. After all, it's not very detailed. It's really just giving you an impression of what's going on as opposed to an image of what's going on. And that, I think, is worth taking into account here. But that's a small example, and that's a small outset of things. It's kind of awful to think about the way a lot of games will put sexual imagery in there, but really, really shy away from having any type of sex involved in the game itself. It's kind of a, for lack of a better term, a problem kind of a case. If a person acted like this, you'd think that there was something wrong with them. So anyway, that's also worth taking into account in some of these cases. Anyway, welcome back. Great video, and I look forward to seeing what else you bring up.